Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Mary Ellen and I am an educator in the state of Illinois. Today I wanted to review a first grade science lesson that I wrote and implemented. This particular lesson plan is part of a larger unit where the children were engaged in exploring different types of fruit. The first fruits we looked at were apples and bananas. Before starting the lesson, I conducted a pre-assessment. I gave each student a half a piece of poster board and an assortment of craft supplies. They were allowed to use whatever supplies they wanted. The children used the supplies to represent different foods that can be made from apples. This is just one example where markers and crayons were used. Once they created the representation, they wrote the names of their foods by the picture. I completed a post-assessment at the end of this lesson as well. I did provide the students with some choices or modifications on how to complete the pre- and post-assessment. I felt this was important to help the students gain ownership of their learning, and it also helps you include all of the different learning styles or abilities within the classroom. The two other options that I gave to the students provided me with the same exact information in order to assess their understanding. The first alternative was to use the paint program and create a picture of foods that could be made of apples. Basically, they did the same exact thing, just utilizing technology. Their second option was to just make a list of items. They utilized half a piece of poster board. They had to number the items, so if they came up with 5 foods, there would be numbers 1 through 5 on the board. They wrote with red, green, and yellow markers. This helped to provide a little bit of art into their project. However, they did not have to do any drawing. After the pre-assessment, I wanted to really catch the students' attention. Therefore, I utilized the reading, thinking, literacy activity during the whole group time. I began circle time with the song Apples and Bananas. The students and I sang and snapped our fingers. For the students who had not mastered snapping yet, I just had them tap their fingers together. I wanted to keep them engaged, so I had the students start guessing what vowel would be utilized in the words. Then I continued that engagement by having the students utilize music objectives and having them say different portions of the song loud, medium, and soft. After our song, the students were really interested in all the supplies I had. I had a mixing bowl and a whisk. I had apples, sugar, flour, salt, butter, eggs, a cookbook, and cinnamon. So we talked about how we were getting ready to read a book with all of these items in it. We also had a discussion on if the students had ever seen these items and what they were used for. This led us into the fact that we were going to learn about the different foods made from apples. Then I pulled out a globe. I asked the students if they had ever seen one of these and if they knew what it was for. Then we worked hard and we found where we lived. And it took us into some more conversation as we talked about how we thought our book was going to correlate the use of a globe and all of these items. How in the world these two things may work together in our book. After our conversation, I showed them the book, How to Make an Apple Pie and See the World. I utilized the directed reading thinking strategy to get them engaged in learning. I pulled the questions from this book. It has a lot of great suggestions for you to utilize within your classroom. I actually got this book while I was in college, and it has a lot of awesome strategies in it. I showed the students the front cover and asked them, what do you think a story with a title like this might be about? Does this picture give you any ideas about what might happen in the story? What do you think might happen in this story? When I was done reading the book, I asked the students to tell me what they liked about the story, what they learned from the story, and just generally what the story was about. I also took this time to have the students share any new vocabulary they heard in the book. Here are some examples of the answers I received. It was then time to let the students get up and moving a little bit, so we learned a poem about apples. Way up high in an apple tree, 2 little apples smiled at me. I shook that tree as hard as I could, and down came the apples. They were good. I had a modification on hand for any of my students who were not able to physically fall to the floor. I had some of the stress ball apples, so when the poem told the students to fall down to the ground, they were able just to hold the apples and lower them down. Then after we were finished with our poem, I laid some different trays out on the tables, and on the trays I had parts of apples as well as food made from apples, and the students were able just to kind of walk around, look at the items on the tray, and talk amongst themselves what they had in common. And during this conversation, I was a facilitator and just observed the conversation. During this time, I also had an activity up on the smartboard. This helped my students with short attention spans. I've put the activity in the description box below. It gives the students some jumbled up apples and they put them in order. During this lesson, the children also worked on improving their reading, writing, and punctuation skills. During independent practice, I gave them each a copy of the apple poem, a piece of writing paper, and an apple shape. The children copied the poem in their best handwriting on the paper. They cut out the apple shapes and glued the paper between the top and bottom. The children then read the poem silently and then with a partner. Yummy! Yes, we made applesauce. And while we were making it, it gave us the perfect opportunity to talk about that vocabulary word, ingredients. I used the covered word strategy while reading a story about making apple pie. I was old school while doing this and just used a transparency and shot it up on the wall. There were some words that were covered up, and while we were reading the sentences, the students gave their suggestions on what word should go into the blank. I had large signs with vowels on them posted in the room. We listened to our song, Apples and Bananas. As each version of the word were said, the children went to the correct vowel choice. To keep them engaged, I gave them instructions on how to move to the different vowel sounds, such as hop, walk to the tempo, or take giant steps. Food tasting time. First, I received permission from the parents in order for the students to taste the foods. Then I provided each student with a small portion, and I had them taste some apples. I had a pre-made graph with different food items listed on it. Depending on your class, you could always make this together. However, I chose to create my graph previous to the lesson. However, the students did the actual graphing. After tasting the food, I gave them little apple stickers, and they went and put the apple sticker under the food that they did like. There are just a few more activities as we close up. First, we go to the University of Illinois Extension website. This reads us the information on the page, and we follow along and listen. I can also print the page for the students to color and take home. We then watched I Love Apples by Harry Kindergarten Music. This covers a lot of the things we learned about in today's lesson, so it makes a great summary. Finally, it's time for our post-assessment, and I talked about how I was going to do that at the beginning of this video. The students will receive either an M for Mastery, a P for Progressing, or a W for Needs Work on It. All of the videos, websites, or books that I talked about throughout this video will be in the description box below. I hope you learned at least one idea that you can implement within your grade level. And please don't forget to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching. And remember to be proud of your work, productive in your day, and positively joyful.